All right, everyone, we're back. The part of the original MBTV crew is restored. Just for today, we got the Speech Master,
the
Daniel,
the
and
speech master.
all new microphone, shirt, different environment, different background, not an atlas.
Yeah, I
So
got I got I got I got $10,000 paintings behind me now.
it's progress. So that being said, uh, that being said, we Daniel just briefly catch us up on what's been going on in the mind of Daniel for the last 8 months.
Oh my God, so much, Damon. Well, recently I've been going through a lot. I've been spending a lot of time with family. This is the year for me for family, more self discovery, obviously. And I had a couple of journeys this year for those of you who are reoccurring to Damon's channel. Um, Doing freelancing slash startup life, making my rounds, um, doing, getting my education in a couple of fields, really focusing on coaching and relationships still and dating and a couple of other things, which I'm excited to talk about if we may or may not get into it in this video because, being relevant, staying relevant for Damon's sake. But yeah, I mean, all in all, it's really great. Summer was good.
Oh, great, great. So, the topic today is going to be about a little bit about socionics relationships. We've kind of briefly touched on this topic before in the past. Obviously, we've had 8 months to brush up some knowledge. Daniel's still studying. I'm still studying. I'm always writing new content as far as it pertains to socionics and the development of interpersonal relationships. Outside of that, a lot of the people who are big socionists, I'm going to give you guys the big middle finger because you guys have overcomplicated a system, which is great for people who are obsessed with theory. It's great, but as far as actual practical application, it's missing some really important aspects you guys seem to be overlooking. And this doesn't go for all socionists. This goes primarily for the ones who are so obsessed with making something complex even more intricately complex, whereas most of us don't know how to apply it, use it, or anything, because we all get into this for the purpose of being able to understand other people. And when you start combining all these fancy jargon with terms, you start moving it out of the realm of being applicable. Okay, so uh, that being said, I want to make sure you guys have a full understanding of what we're going to talk about today. So, the socionics relations, this is going to be the D model D for Damon and Daniel socionics. Okay, so it's
The
model
double
D.
D.
Yeah, the double D. So that being said, Daniel, you want to start us off with kind of what you've picked up over the last months or so?
Yeah, so you correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm going to be wrong a lot, it seems, but you can hear me, right?
Yep, I can. I think she was referring to my volume, and I've already corrected it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a mute button on my mic that I use. But so in terms of socionics, like I'm still discovering my preferred type in socionics. Um, it's what's more fascinating to me. I actually at this point I really don't really mind what my type is for as long as I can get an understanding of the intertype dynamics, which is something I find really interesting because when you cross compare socionics to MBTI, there's a lot of gray areas that I noticed that you can't really answer when you switch back to MBTI in terms of intertype dynamics. So, I've been getting familiarized with that content because it's really relevant to what I'm doing on the micro. So in terms of duals, the supervision type, all these different kind of types of relationships that we have in our lives. So maybe you want to expand on that and like what you've known to kind of be a really great kind of a way to understand a differentiating mindset between MBTI and the intertype dynamics.
Okay, well, MBTI doesn't have type dynamics. The
Well,
reason for it is,
exactly.
well, it does have intra-type dynamics, but as far as intertype dynamics, ENTJ, INFP, ENTJ, there is none. The reason why is it based off personalized perspectives, that it's both introverted and extroverted. Okay, so MBTI has two of these aspects. There's an internalized aspect, which is I compare to self, and then I compare our objects to each other out there. And that's going to be extroversion versus introversion in MBTI. These terms are not interchangeable with socionics. This is where socionics has kind of moved away from this whole introverted, extroverted aspect. And when I say it's moved away, it's actually been away. We've kind of brought it back in, and now we're moving it back out, or at least making the effort to understand that it is not about the MBTI or the JCF definition of introversion versus extroversion. Because in MBTI, everything, it's either objective or subjective, whereas Socionics understands that everything is subjective. There's a comparative analysis done by the subject. Whereas MBTI, it's both objective and subjective based on what it is that you're comparing. So with that being said, if everything is in MBTI, if you have a subjective element, then you automatically are going to subjectively relate in a different way. It's a psychological perspective. So when you look at the perspectives of JCF, which is Jungian cognitive functions, what you're seeing is that I'm going to compare with an archetype that I've created that could be different from someone else's archetype. So it's no longer about output, okay? So MBTI doesn't have output. So intertype relations is not really a thing in MBTI. Now we tend to want to see how types relate, and I'm sure there is some correlation with people not liking a certain type being not favorable toward another type's way of approaching things, right? But you'll find that you hate some ENTPs, you like some other ENTPs. There's too much variance there to actually create a type dynamic. Whereas in Socionics, it's very, very different, because what you establish in Socionics is things that are valued and unvalued. It completes the 8-function model. So you have things that are pieces of information that are coming at you that another person is demonstrating, or another person is putting out there, or pieces of their ego element that they're putting out there. And those pieces of information are either valuable to you or they're not valuable to you. And if they're not valuable to you, a lot of those aspects of that person's character, you're gonna have to try a lot harder to try to understand their character or understand what they're putting out there. And if you don't, then you're probably not gonna get along with them very well. So the idea is that it's a model to help you understand how to navigate human relations, but ultimately it's not rules that's saying that you cannot do this or you cannot do that. Anybody can try to deal with other people's information metabolisms. How healthy it will be, I do think there is a limit that is on that, depending on how well you actually are able to develop and grow and appreciate other people's things that you naturally don't value, which is harder to do, easier said than done, let me put it that way. So that's the point of the intertype relations in Socionics, is that I think that you get along with people in your quadra better because everything that's valued is valued. So pieces of information that one person puts out, you'll actually be receptive to that. Okay, you'll be receptive to those pieces of information because they are something you value. Whereas another type that they may be putting out a piece of information that you don't value, you're going to get annoyed, irritated, bothered. And depending on that type of information, how it's metabolized by you is going to depend on it's going to fluctuate with your level of annoyance or disagreement or whatever. So it's important you understand how each type interacts with other types based on what type of information they're putting out there and how you personally metabolize that information.
So it's almost like the point of least resistance with quadras, right?
Yeah, it's like a point of least resistance. But I mean, if you're, for example, I identify most with SLE and Socionics. So if someone is putting out information pertaining to the aspect of introverted feeling or your white ethics, naturally, I'm going to have a hard time with that information. I'm going to get annoyed. I'm frustrated with it because it's not the type of information that I really value. I'm conscious of that, but I also have a harder time metabolizing that. Just like people's diets have a hard time metabolizing certain foods. Some people can eat barbecue ribs every day and they still stay skinny, whereas other people can't metabolize barbecue ribs every day and they gain weight. So it's the same kind of thing, but from a cognition standpoint, is what type of information can you metabolize really well? And those aspects I cannot metabolize. I have challenges with those aspects of metabolism. So, or even the role function versions of a super ego relationship with, say, someone who's IEE. Okay, so IEEs naturally will project extroverted intuition type information, and for a little bit I can put up with it, but after a while it's like, okay, this is getting really frustrating. I'm having a really hard time dealing with this type of information because it's overwhelming, because it's information that pertains to something that is unconscious. So I'll constantly feel out of the loop with that information, and I'm unconsciously aware of how that information is being metabolized. So I cannot feel like I can contribute enough to that conversation, and vice versa. I'm speaking in the sense of SE, and that particular person is not receiving that information very well, and they're getting frustrated because they don't feel like they can communicate with me. And so that lack of rapport is not established, and that's where the problem is. So really being able to generate that rapport That's huge in any type of relationship, and it generally comes with the type of information that is valued by that person. And so if I, it's kind of like if you both have the same favorite team, like my hat, for example. Oh, you know what? He's wearing a Yankees hat. Oh, then, there's that common ground. It's the same with the type of information that you're putting out there and the type of information that you're receiving from the other person.
Right. And so I guess my question within that is, you talk about types that don't necessarily get together, how much we can really metabolize, data and kind of like a common ground between one person and the other. What would be like your recommendation from a socionic standpoint in terms of meshing together when, it's like an absolute experience that needs to happen, like working with somebody or maybe a living arrangement or, right, being next to somebody who's the opposite sports team as you, right? Like, having to be there. Like, what would you like? How would socionics? Because it's easy to see it on paper and understand that. Okay, cool. I can't, like, if you're you and you prefer your type SLI, you're like, there's only a certain point of like extra intuitive like content that I can take in before it gets to me. What would you recommend people do in that situation where there is a patience level? There's a threshold where it's there. Like, I'll give you an example. Me and my grandma, I have a threshold for putting up with physical labor things and being micromanaged. I'm trying to help her out, and I'll go the whole way because I unconditionally love my grandma, but the labor work is, I don't like feeling uncomfortable. So this is like an environment where I do have like a patience level, and I know that, within 1 or 2 hours, I want to get there. And like, at what point what would you recommend to people who are more aware of that than not?
Okay, so first off, I'd like to correct my previous statement. I might have said that my role function is unconscious. I had an audience member said it was, it is conscious. If I implied that it was unconscious, what I meant is a point that is very, very weak, and hitting that weak point, it's hard to metabolize that information. But you're consciously aware of your difficulty metabolizing that information. So I want to make sure I clear that up if anybody misunderstood that. Whereas appealing to the unconscious is fine as long as it's valued. So this really boils down to what's valued and unvalued by a particular type. And type information that's not valued is the information that you're going to have either a difficult time metabolizing, or it's information that you either ignore or you just prefer to demonstrate and you don't take it seriously. So, but that being said, let me answer this question. Daniel, you mentioned that there's certain tolerance levels. A lot of that depends on things that are outside of type. I don't think I've ever met a single person that loves being micromanaged. There a lot of people say, well, there are more types open to that or not. I don't really think very many people love having bosses. I mean, who really likes to go to work and have a boss? I don't think anybody does. But I mean, as long as they're working and having a purpose set out for them that's outside of that, then it's important, right? And they're doing what they need to do, and they're okay with subjugating themselves to a hierarchy if necessary. Now, the type of information that we're talking about when someone is having difficulty with a particular aspect of a piece of information, right? So the idea is, if you understand that the core fundamentals of what Socionics is trying to say is that no matter, you can look at aspects of the same thing. 8 people can get together and look at the same thing and take 8 different types of information from that thing, right? It's kind of like you guys watch a movie and you see a scene, and everybody's going to tell you, say, hey, tell me about that scene. They're going to tell you something different in that scene. And so they're going to say, I saw this, or I saw this, or I saw this, or I saw this. And you'll find that these people of these 8 different aspects are all going to see something different, right? Some people will say this person was plotting something. They'll be looking at that hidden meaning. Other people will say that this person did this exactly as they did it. Another person will say that person was taller than the other person. Another person might say, that was not a very efficient way to kill that person. The other person, you're going to have those people looking at their aspects that are most pertaining to those personalities, and they're going to be able to metabolize that information differently based on that little scene. And that's what this is about. So if you have something that's unvalued, you may recognize that piece of information, but then when you're asked, you kind of just put it off to the side because it's not pertinent to you. Okay, so the idea is to understand that. Okay, so you may just go, I don't. That's even stupid to mention. Why do I mention that? To me, that's common sense. So if you would say that probably with your ignoring function or your demonstrative function. It's common sense. That's dumb. I don't even need to say that. Everybody knows that. Okay, so to you, it's like, okay, but it's dumb. I don't need to say that. Whereas your leading function is your ego function. It's what you want to project out there. And that's what you do is you project it out there. Like, this is who I am. This is what I'm confident about. Here's what I want to show the world. That's what I think I see. So seeing something in your ego block, whether it's your creative or your leading function, is going to be much more associated with your observation and that dynamic element that you're going to be able to see of between those two functions kind of interplay on what that person sees. So for my case, it's going to be the power dynamics of the situation and the comparative analysis of the relationships between those people. And what I mean by that is more of the static logical observation of the relationship in that particular thing. That person's bigger than the other person. This person looks weaker. That person could potentially win. This person is stronger. This person is weaker. And those are the things I'd be paying attention to. Of where you have somebody else who's probably much more on the intuitive side is going to say, that person is weaker now, but they have a lot of potential because look at the way they're standing. They could actually get stronger with time. They may live in that situation. They also may use that particular object in their hand to their advantage. They may be seeing things in that scope much more effectively than me, which would pay attention to the information that's most pertinent to me. So that's how information metabolism works. So when you have two people that share the same valued functions, what happens is one person is taking that information. The other person's like, oh my God, you see that? I didn't see that. That's cool that you mentioned that because I saw this. And the other person's like, oh my God, you know what? I didn't see that, but that's really cool. So that's how duality works in a very fundamental way, is because one person's looking at an aspect that you value, but it might be unconscious for you, right? So it could be your mobilizing or suggestive function, and yet they see that so clearly and they're able to pick it up real quick. And then you're like, wow, that actually is kind of interesting now that you mention it. I didn't notice that at first, but it's really interesting. Whereas if it's unvalued by that person, it's a totally different thing. If it's unvalued by the person, what winds up happening is they'll say something, oh, that's cool. Right? So they don't really care that you made that observation because that information is not pertinent to them, or it's unvalued and it's unconscious, which is not a good place to be, right? Or if it's valued and if it's unvalued or it's conscious, or valued and unconscious, right? So you have those dynamics where you have to understand, okay, are we really in this situation to where this person is speaking what I think is either common sense or just completely stupid, right? So we have the things of the id block. How your id metabolizes information is going to be very unconscious. It's not going to be conscious of that. And to you, it's just kind of like a gimme, like, okay, what the hell's the point of saying that? Okay, it's dumb. Why are you saying that? Like, I don't get why that information is even necessary. Whereas if it's something that pertains to your super ego block, which is also your other unvalued block, then it's going to be much more like, you're not going to necessarily think it's stupid, but at a certain point you do think it's stupid. And you're also going to say, internally you're going to go, I can't believe I didn't notice that, but it's really stupid at the same time. You might hold yourself to a higher criticism in that regard. So it's important that you understand how these blocks work in socionics, because that's really going to determine your relationship with other people. If it's super ego, it's going to be a thing that society presses on you, and somewhere you feel like it has to be done, but you hate it. Whereas the id block, it's like, that didn't even need to be said. That was just done, period, right? Id block is kind of just ignored in general. You see a purpose for it ultimately, but it doesn't need to be said. It's better unspoken. Whereas the super ego is much more like a pain point. So the id block you're confident with, the super ego you're not. So that's kind of the fundamental of that relationship. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. But, it makes me also think about, like you said, like early on in your brief overview just now, there's just so many variables at play, right? And putting aside being very proactive with socionics, not just it being theoretical. When you say that, there's a lot more variables aside from, how people communicate, how people socialize. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. No person is the same, right? And, you can join that idea with what you're saying just now, right? Where there is so much variety in society. My first idea is like, cool. When I think relationships, or when I think, either working with people or my friendship structures or other people's friends or whatever, it makes me really think, how much can we really identify on the fly, right? How much it really will be applicable in real life in terms of, you know, and this isn't me coming from like an opposite kind of point of view where I'm usually coming from, because I want to see the application. But like if I'm just like a normal person and I'm not me, right? And I'm like, okay, cool, I'm Joe Smith, and you know, there's 5 people in front of me. I get along with 2, the other 3. How much more relevant can it be, you know, on the fly? Or to the people watching this video, the people who may come across this video, what do you think is most applicable to the people watching in terms of, you know, if they have a situation going on in their life and they're like, oh, man, I really wish I could figure this out, you know, what can I do? If that makes sense. Like, how do you bring it back full circle, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, when it comes to socionic, it's not the answer for everything either. I mean, it's dumb to think that 2 people of the same quad or the same type will all get along. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, you both may see and perceive this and metabolize the same information correctly, but you also may have different values, right? And so it's bigger than just socionics. Oh yeah, all dualities work. No, they don't. That'd be saying the first freaking, you know, IEI that I come across, I'll fall madly in love with. That's crazy.
One can only hope, right?
Yeah, that's insane. Like, there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, you have to have people that share similar values with the same valued functions, and then you start getting into this perspective of, oh, that now makes sense. That's what the idea is behind all this crap. So when you're thinking that socionics is the end all, you're crazy, because there's so much more to interpersonal dynamics. And we're talking about energy levels, spirituality, maturity. We're talking about personal, you know, values that matter, your family, your culture, things that are important to you. It goes way beyond the type of information you metabolize. So, you know, that's another aspect that I think people need to understand and move into, is just knowing that it's one piece of the big puzzle of understanding people. And that's why you use different systems like Enneagram and MBTI and Socionics, and some of you astrology or whatever else it may be that is pertinent to you, helping you form an understanding of other people. The disadvantage to astrology is that you have to know people's dates and charts and all this crap to really even know what the hell's going on. Because I mean, I guess if you're really good, you can probably look at behavior and assume what type they are as far as their sun and, you know, their ascending and all this other houses and crap I don't know. But you know, but in the perspective, it's just one piece of really understanding people. I would say that astrology is probably the most specific of any system, probably to the point where it has faults for being too specific. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I don't relate to my astrological chart. But it doesn't mean that astrology is bullshit. It just means that there's probably parts of my character I don't fully understand yet.
You could have been born on the wrong date too. That could throw you off.
Yeah, I could have been, or a wrong time or some shit. But all in all, I mean, I relate to most of it, but not all of it. Some of it makes no sense to me. I'm like, okay. And trust me, people who are maybe watching this video, they're like, oh, you know, you just haven't talked to the right astrologer. Well, you know what? I have. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of them, and they all have perceived my chart differently in different perspectives, and none of them have been entirely accurate. So that being said, though, it's just little pieces of the giant puzzle trying to understand people. All in all, you have to have a sense of maturity. You have to know where your life is. You have to know how to talk to people. You have to know how to communicate, your skill set, your skill level. You know, there's so many things that, you know, there's so many different aspects of people that you can't just confine everything to one system. You can try, but you're never gonna. You can't. I mean, if your beliefs are off in comparison with the type of person that you want to be in a romantic relationship with, then you're not going to be able to meet on common ground. And if you believe one thing or value one thing, and I'm not talking about types of information now, which is socionics is about information metabolism. This is talking about core values. I mean, you can have a Christian of any of the 16 sociotypes, and you can also have an atheist of any of the 16 sociotypes. And it's unlikely that these two will get along when it comes to their religious beliefs. And I don't care what quadrant they're in. So there's a lot of different people that don't understand this. Oh, they're my dual, so we get along. That's bullshit, because you're not taking in the other factors. But duals are all about the type of information that's valued and shared. Okay, so.
And you know what? At the end of the day, too, what I've really come to realize, it's really about, and this isn't coming from like a selfish point of view, but it's really about what's most relevant to you. right? Like, you know, if you start dating people, or, you know, you start becoming friends with people who are your dual type, that may be great, but it may also not be as relevant to you than if, like, let's just say it's a different kind of dynamic that you have, right, with another kind of type. You know what I mean? It's really about kind of plug and play and figuring it out for yourself. And, you know, it's crazy because I can say, okay, cool, well, you know, I'm this in MBTI and that person's that in Socionics, and there's just so much cross connecting. At what point does it like lose its potency, right? And you know what I mean?
It loses its potency if you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You know, if you're freaking stupid, it doesn't have any potency. But if you know how to put it in its place and realize that it's a small piece of the puzzle, then you can accept it and use it as it needs to be. But it's not the answer to everything.
It's not.
No.
But it has its application, though. You know,
I think the biggest problem with people in general is they don't freaking read, and that's the biggest problem, is that people don't read. And I'm sorry, but reading the freaking dialogue on a video game is not considered reading.
Hey, if you're not reading 14 books a year, you're behind on average.
You're probably ahead if you're reading 1 book a year with the majority of society. But, you know, most people don't read after high school. So, yeah. You know, that's the reality, is they let everything go. They don't need to read. They got Spark Notes and Click Notes and all this other bullshit, and online snippets and false media that's out there, and every kind of other bullshit information that people are pertaining to as far as, you know, what they're picking up. They're not really actually getting into the core depth of reading to really try to expand their thinking and realize where you may be fucking up in your life. And that's the problem that people are having, is they don't realize that they have this. They're not expanding their mind into bigger avenues and realizing where they could be, because they're not expanding their scope. The biggest problem is they don't read. And that's what, it's not about what sociotype it is. It's what about, you know, I like I said, I pertain myself to SLE, and, you know, it's like, I can look at somebody and go, that guy's an SLE, but he's also a freaking idiot. Or that guy's an SLE and he's a male chauvinistic pig. I can do that. And I can also look at my own behavior and judge myself in the same way. Wow, I didn't act the way I should have acted in that situation. Yeah. You know, and that comes from being able to expand my database of all the information that I'm picking up and reading, and you probably shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't have done this, or you probably shouldn't have behaved this way. And I screw up all the time. Yeah. You know, but it's I think there's a lot of variables that people are missing, and I'm really just disappointed in the entire typology community, because it's like, it gives people a reason to treat other people like shit, you know, because you're a ESE, so you're stupid, or you're a freaking, you know, ESFJ, and you're stupid, or you're Enneagram 1 or 2, you're a bitch, and all this other stupid shit that the typology community seems to be okay with, because there's jokes about what type you are. You know, that's dumb to me.
It's the old adage, though. It's like, there's so many people, they're given knowledge, but when it's time to execute and grow and evolve and appreciate other people for the competencies that they have being different, people always fall short of that stick, you know, and it sucks to see that. And like I showed you the other day, I created a Facebook group on that premise of, there's just so much of that out there in this community. And I'm just like, listen, I'm here, I'm trying to understand people to help other people out, right? If one type is having shortcomings and, you know, that's natural, or it's a correlation with that type, I'm not going to put that on them. I want to help raise, you know, awareness and have people move on, right, and evolve. I don't want to set people backwards, and I don't want to be a part of the non-accountable people out there that are doing the reverse work, right, into play. You know what I mean? There's just too many people who think they know everything, or they know enough, which is not enough. Because if you're going to start doing personal dev, then you need to put work and keep doing it if you're going to be in that kind of community. If you're going to actually affect other people, you should do it positively, not based off of like I'm really a big fan of this idea right now. You're either self-serving, outer respecting, or a balance of the two, which is what I think you should be. And not just this community, but in so many others, and just in general in life, you should be a balance between, this is what I want in life, this is what I want to pursue, and this is how I also respect everybody around me, right? And I believe part of that comes very, like, in this community, this close-knit community of people who are into typology, and they get to know a certain amount of things. And, it's, you know, Socionics is a totally different beast of its own. You know, I feel like there's not as many people into Socionics as much as MBTI, but I feel like, you know, in terms of MBTI, there is so much people who are just kind of exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame, but without people like us and maybe people viewing this video, um, without that kind of resistance to really kind of show people that, hey, like, it's not cool, you know, don't stigmatize these people, don't stigmatize types, because at the end of the day, it just has particular functions. You know, types are not people, and it's really important to notate that like MBTI, for example, if you combine MBTI, NLP, Socionics, and Enneagram, that's like only not even probably 1% of everything that's accounted for when it comes to people. You know what I mean? It's only a small parcel of the bit. It just kind of gives you more of an idea of what's kind of going on if you're interested into that, right? If you really want to go the extra mile and kind of really affect people for the positive, then it's cool. It's cool to know that kind of stuff, because it can be the make or break to making people, like helping people and supporting them get into a better place. You know, and that's happened for me countlessly. You know, where whatever I know from Socionics or Enneagram or MBTI, you know, I'm able to like connect with people in a better way, and as a result, you know, it really kind of builds that relationship, right? Or it helps somebody out, and that's what it's really there for. It's not really there to be the make or break or to be the primary or the predominant. It's really just there for a better perspective, you know. Despite all of this, like if it was concrete, if it was absolute, that's something different. If a scientist one day wakes up and totally proves a theory to be right, before that day comes, you know, you can only subjectively see all this stuff in terms of how it really relates to us on a personal level and what we can really do with it, which is just kind of like help each other out, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm all with it. I think there's an importance there. I think there's an importance to just understanding, you know, the limits that we place on other people too. And, you know, it's as far as, you know, somebody's not confined to a type. And if you look at the bigger picture, people move throughout time, and people are kind of transitioning through their various stages of life. And, you know, I say that it's if you're in a position where you don't know, then you don't know. And it's okay not to know. It's okay not to know something. And I've said this in other videos. It's okay to be stupid about certain things, because it's a process. And I just think it's important to, you know, clarify that, because I don't think stupid is a permanence. I think it's a choice that you make on the daily.
About to say choice.
Yeah, it is a choice. It's a choice you make on the daily if you want to freaking be stupid about something or not. And, you know, I make the wrong choice on the daily, where I consider myself freaking stupid on the daily. I consider myself, oh yeah, you shouldn't have done that. That was stupid. And, you know, it's not a permanent quality. So for those who might have been offended, you know, it's important to understand that it's not a permanence. It's a choice that you make. And, you know, did I decide to go sit in a corner and suck my thumb and wait for the phone to ring for business to come to my door? Or did I decide to go out and get it? Or did I decide to read? Or did I make a stupid choice? You know, there's things that I consider, and I use these harsh words because it seems that in reality, there's nothing else that hits home to me than putting a little bit of harshness to what we're saying. You know, and I think there's the good understanding of that when people actually get to the point of being able to realize the consequences of the choices they make. And there's a book, it's called the Slight Edge, and, you know, and it talks about this. It's the compounding effect of your actions and your choices. And there's another book, it's called The Compound Effect. But if you read the book, what you find out is every stupid decision you make compounds, or every good decision you make compounds. And if you keep making good decisions, your life in the beginning is going to be hard because you're making the harder choices, but in the end, it exponentially gets great. And then the other scale is that you make the easy choices in the beginning, you make the stupid choices, and they're easy to do because they're dumb, and anybody can make a dumb choice, and then your life compounds negatively. And so it's the aspect of understanding that sometimes the harder way is the way to go. You know, instead of just saying, oh yeah, I'm going to take the easy road out. Because I mean, I make stupid decisions every day. I really do. And I haven't gotten any better sometimes. And that's stupid, right? I should recognize where I'm I'm like, dang, you did the
Don't
same.
get sick for another 3 months, Damon, please.
You did the same stupid crap you did yesterday, and that's fine by me. You know, like I'm okay with people going through this process. I think I made a video about this not too long ago. I said, you know, it's okay to suck, because it is okay to suck. It's okay to suck at the process that you're. Yeah, it's okay to suck. When you first pick up a baseball bat, you may be kind of talented. You may be able to swing it. Some people pick it up and they'll look like they're waving a wand around. You know, they don't know how to swing that thing. They don't know how to do it, and it's okay to suck. And then they get, oh yeah, you know. And I learned this in sales. I mean, when I went through some grueling sales training, that's what it was like. When you suck that bad, at a point, you have to go, wow, I really suck at this. And then you actually can have some fun because you realize how bad you suck. And this is all about perspective and the way that we view things. So it's important to understand when it comes to the dynamics between people. Yeah, you're 100% correct. It's 1% of these systems capture the entire human element. And maybe it's bigger than 1%, but it's a very marginal amount.
Yeah, I'm exactly with that.
Of course. But it's a marginal amount because there's so many other variables. I mean, I've got so much damage emotionally to me that it's like, I don't care what type it is or what type that I am. It's going to manifest as a common ground in the field of psychology as, what do they call it? Emotional armor, guardedness, you know, abrasive, brash. They have all these terms. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know the terms, but in clinical psychology, they have terms for that. And, you know, and it's not, oh, all those people are SLEs, right? Or all those people are LSIs. That's not how it works. It's more of, these people have had some trauma and they fall in this category. This person is abusive or abrasive or whatever, and they fall in this category. Or this person is manic and he goes into these manic sprees, or this person is bipolar, or this person has this issue. And there's so much more based on emotional things, nurture, nature. You've got the stars aligning, celestial bodies moving, astrology. You've got the state of mind, our cartography of our brain and how we map the world. And this is why I value people to take the action of reading so much, is because people need to read. People need to read because you know so little. I know so little compared to what there is to know. And I'm an advocate for people reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and getting information, because, you know, I'm sorry, YouTube videos don't do it all. You know, there's something about reading that is really special. And I don't know if it's because you're getting into the author's head. It's quiet enough to where you can reflect, or it's there's something about it that's really different from anything else, any other media. I think that there's something about it. Audiobooks, they're a close second, but I would say that.
You know what I love about reading, Damon? Like,
what?
All the books that I like reading, there are, and I can totally say that with all certainty. There's so many authors out there, right? In terms of what you want to be reading in whatever field, there are particular authors that I love reading because the mind flow of that author and how they think and how I think are so conducive, and it's so parallel, right? And I like that. And then that allows me to learn way quicker. It allows me to really get, like, kind of metabolize quicker, as you would say in Socionics, right? It just, there's so much opportunity when it does come to reading and how efficient you can be in terms of, and like, it's so annoying because it's like reading for like majority of people, I feel like, is like the cold water effect when you want to go into a pool. Everybody's so afraid to just jump into the water and then start having fun. Like, as if people are so annoyed to like start reading, but then once they start, they get into it. You know what I mean? Whereas just do the work. So many people are not willing to do the work, whether it's being able to understand something, understand somebody's, why they believe, whatever they believe. And it's truly frightening, because it's like, if you're going out of your way and putting the energy to be resistant on something, why aren't you putting as much energy into self-educating yourself into what you're ignorantly getting into, right? And I'm not getting into any kind of field exactly while saying that, but for example, if you're getting into MBTI, if you really want to talk MBTI or philosophy or anything, you know, really do the work and commit yourself to actually getting interested into it. Don't just half-ass it and go, okay, cool. Well, this is what I know. I'm 45 years old and I learned this when I was like 20 years ago, and this is what I know, and this is what I know. And it's just like, no, that's not what's on the table right now, right? You're not exempt, just like everybody else, to evolve and help others evolve. You know what I mean? But people want to do that. People want to half-ass. And it's really about sticking with people who are also trying to stay relevant. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that. But it's also about being real, like you said. Like, there's not enough people being real with themselves. You got to, if you really want to move forward in life, you know, you got like stick with what you're proficient at, share what you're proficient with other people, and expand on, you know, what you can, you know, stay relevant with yourself.
Right. Yeah. And you're making some solid points, and I think that's important. You know, I think that ultimately, if we're talking about the relations between people in general, I mean, you just at some point you've got to accept the way you are too.
Yeah.
And exactly. At some point, you just have to accept that there's aspects that you're not going to value. And this is kind of where socionics comes into play. There's aspects that are just not going to be valued. And you have to accept that you're never going to be this complete, full human being. You're always going to have flaws, and there's nothing you can do about it. And there comes a level of self-acceptance there. But I think a lot of this is spiritual too. And it goes beyond just the way that your brain works, because your mind isn't everything. And so I think there's a lot of value in being able to understand how all these different dimensions, come to play in reality, and how they actually have an effect. And that's the idea: is what kind of effect are you having on the people around you? And you know,
staying accountable. It's staying
accountable to yourself, and also being able to hold yourself accountable. And on top of that, being able to accept the way you are in certain areas. There's an extreme here, though. There's people who are too self-accepting, you know, and then there's people who are the other side. They're too self-rejecting. And so you've got to have that balance to be able to make the modifications you need to, but also to put your foot down and say, no, I'm not changing for this.
Yeah. I do think, though, on that note, it is necessary to be borderline on one polarity over the other, like, and bouncing back. Because I'll give you an example. You know, this year has been a lot for me. And so I'm coming out of like my mode of like being on the extreme of kind of getting into like who I am, and then bouncing into balance again. Right. And so I think everybody needs to find like their own like rhythm, right? Just like you have your circadian rhythm of sleep. People need to find their circadian rhythm of growth and their exponential progress. Right, and find that balance. But too many people are claiming security over risk, right? And people correlate too much with risk and negativity, whereas I see the exact opposite. Risk is where you can grow, right? Without risk and putting part of yourself on the line for personal development, then you're really going to stay in the same place, you know. And I kind of take a look at it this way, you know, most successful people in life, by definition, they really kind of maximize on their proficiencies of what they're great at, right? They still work on things about themselves and whatever in a very spiritual way. They may not call it spiritual, right? But they help others too. And that's the idea, is that they kind of mastered their own category that they reside in, whatever they're proficient in, right? And I think it's important to use your strengths to really grow within all these different areas, right? Socionics, it's like, and it's so true. Like, you know, it comes to a point where how much of yourself can you really know without really executing what you think you know about yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the success comes from understanding where you're weak and understanding that, you know, accepting it fully.
Yeah.
Whereas if a person who hasn't accepted their own weaknesses typically gets real defensive about those particular weaknesses. A person who's very grown has accepted those weaknesses and realizes that it's a process. One of the most important things I learned through the grueling sales training that I went through was, you know, respect the process.
Oh, I love that one, dude. That one's the best.
Yeah, respect the process. If you don't respect the process will own you. And it's the truth. You have to respect that at your certain stage, and you will grow into where you need to be if you respect that you are going to move through these stages, and there isn't a damn thing you can do about it. And that's very important to understand when it moves into the idea of what your whole personification is, that I'm going to say that I identify with this particular person or this particular aspect, and these aspects are weak in myself. And I know that these aspects, that these weaker aspects, are moving through a process in which I have to respect the speed in which these things are moving, even though I want them to be fixed immediately, you can't nudge it. This is where it comes to that spiritual battle of, you know, total acceptance versus resistance. You know, are you resisting these aspects of yourself? Because I'll tell you what, here's where I screw up in life, just so y'all know. All right. I can go through any issue and I feel a certain way in my body, right? I feel a certain feeling, whatever that feeling may be. Yeah, it's a feeling in my body. I can feel it physically. I don't usually exert it, but I can feel it. It may be a pressure. It may be a kind of a pain or a sensation or whatever, and I can feel it, right? Instead of actually sitting with it and letting it run its course and accepting it fully, I tend to distract myself and never pay attention to it, ignore it until it goes away. And by doing that, what I'm doing is actually kind of, you got to think of process of feelings as an input-output mechanism. You need to let it come in and sit with it and let it process and work its way out of the system, as opposed to let it come in and close that door and shove it down until it piles up and eventually it just explodes. The machine breaks. And this is where people have emotional issues, such as myself, where we bottle all these particular things in. And we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't do that, because that's what happens is we're not allowing those things to actually process out. And I'm telling you, I say we, I mean me. I don't know about everybody else, but allowing those things to actually process out and you know, work their way through my system. So that is the biggest challenge that I faced to date, for sure. Is I noticed that I start feeling a certain way, and instead of sitting with it and being able to sit there peacefully with it and let it process and work its way out, I tend to push it to the side and distract myself, whether it's a good book, you know, maybe a movie or whatever, or something that I will distract myself with so I don't have to think about the feeling. And so it could be anything. It could be a new date opportunity or whatever the heck it may be in reality that I will pursue at any given point. Because it's a distraction from facing those internal things. It's an avoidance of the internal state, and being able to sit with those things and taking that and channeling that into other things of a period of aggression. And so the idea is, you know, you have to really begin to understanding the way where we are in our cycle and the issues that we have to work through and processing those. And this is outside of typology. This is a lot of spiritual crap, you know. So, you know, there's the whole idea behind it. So we have to understand that. So anyway, I'm gonna let you add on to that, so I can keep talking.
Yeah, I'm like, man, you're turning into an ENFP right now. Like what? But
how's that ENFP? Seriously,
that's the joke.
Yeah, how the hell is that ENFP?
I'm joking. Like,
no, you're not. No, I'm just kidding. Move on.
I'm being.
No, there was an ENFP comment in the comments, and I was messing with it.
I'm placating, man. But no, but you're absolutely right though, and there is some application here to typology, right? It's cool though when you get to know yourself, right, after being on this earth for however long you are here, and you have typology to kind of like help you kind of bob and weave through like your own understanding of like what you're going through, right? Like I've discovered that a lot of what I know already in life, I could already see in like these theories, right? Which is cool because it means that if theories didn't exist, then people would still be able to understand one another, right? That's common sense, right? You don't need theories to get that. You may not be as, you know, you may not have a high EQ, right? You know, but if you can always put one-on-one together at some point, you know, but at the end of the day, it's just really about you and making it relevant for you. And I'm going to say relevant 1,000 more times, but as you were just saying, you know, there's a localization that needs to happen when you're going through certain ebb and flows of life, right? And all this data doesn't make any sense if you're not applying it, right? And you're going through all these things. Yeah, exactly. Puberty, right? Without puberty, we wouldn't be having a lot of these conversations. But like my thing is, right, everything that I experienced this year was a result of me, my strengths and my weaknesses, right? All encompassing. You know, there's a lot of decisions I made this year that were not based off of my strengths, but based off of, you know, thinking that my weaknesses got better, but they're really just the same. And I could have handled situations better. That's just kind of the natural process that I follow. And, you know, we all have particular challenges that we try and face. And typology may or may not help with those things. But what I'm saying is you can always delegate, have people in your life to show you the way, not necessarily duels, you know, but every type has some kind of competency to bring to the table. And that's something that I just really appreciate about people. That's why I love getting to know people. That's why I'm so interested in what Damon has to say all the time, because he's so interesting. But more or less, you know, he has really great points, and he has a really interesting perspective coming from, you know, the type that he prefers and, you know, his experience than anybody else that I meet. You know, I honestly, and you know, maybe you can extend on this, Damon, but, you know, in terms of EQ, I totally believe that somebody's intelligence is totally determinant on somebody's curiosity, right? And so when we're talking about people who don't like to read, and we're talking about people who don't necessarily want to grow and evolve, and they're claiming security over risk, right? These are people who are being very uncurious and very static, I guess you can say, towards like their own growth, towards their own evolution. I think that people who are really sincerely curious, right, to have their own like either success or lifestyle that they want for themselves, or to understand people, they truly are curious about information in general. They're curious about people. They're curious about life, versus the very exact opposite of that spectrum, right? Which is, you know, this is what I know. This is the space. This is the radius that I know, and that's all that I really want to know, right? And I don't know if you have anything to talk about that, but
Well, I mean, yeah, when people are not as dumb as we make them be, or even if they believe themselves to be.
I don't think that's why I bring the curious thing.
I'm just saying that sometimes it's scary to go outside your comfort zone and realize and start studying something that's way outside of you. And I think it's fear-based more than it is intelligence-based. I don't think, I mean, there are some legitimately dumb people out there. No offense to people who are legitimately dumb, but
there's plenty of dumb people out there, man.
There's plenty of them. But I mean, there's a lot of people who are objectively choosing to be that way. It's better to not know. Ignorance is bliss kind of mentality. And, you know, unfortunately, I think that, you know, there's a lot of people who just prefer that. And I know that they at some point, they know they're avoiding it. And so, like I said, at the end of the day, it's not about your level of intelligence that gets you to survive in this world. It does play a factor, but it's a minimal factor. It's about your ability to be human, and you know, and understand that there are universal principles taking place at any given point. And I think that a character is best developed by recognizing what role they play in the grand scheme of things, and I mean internally too. Who am I, right? And coming to terms with own self-identity. You know, at the end of the day, you can do a lot of things, but, you know, whatever it may be, it may not actually solve any of the problems that you think it's going to be solving. It may not actually be the issues that you think you're attempting to tackle that are causing your dissatisfaction with life. So there are things that are much more pertinent to our perception, and yet we kind of distract ourselves because we're afraid of going outside of our comfort zone and experiencing ourselves in full. It's like an out-of-body experience. You don't want to see yourself for what you truly are. And so by being ignorant and choosing a path of ignorance, you're avoiding a lot of the things that are important. And I've had a lot of these experiences because people in my life have told me, you do this and you do this and you do this. And I was in denial. No, I don't do that. Your perception's wrong. And you're not seeing things clearly or whatever. And I was in denial, but the actual reality is I didn't want to know that at the time. It wasn't my time to begin to take in that type of information. As I've gotten older, I've started taking in that information a lot more, not to beat myself up, but actually begin to understand how those things actually play a role in my overall development and how I can become a better human being every single day. And that's one of my mentors told me. He said, respect the process, become 1% better every single day. If you can just strive to be better every single day, don't think about the end and think about just better every single day.
It's about the process. It's about
just improve. You know, I don't like disappearing for a year or 2 years or 4 years and then coming back and seeing people at the same place.
I hate that.
Yeah, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you at the same place? And I don't ever judge them prematurely and say, why are you at the same place? I let them tell me, I don't feel like I've gotten anywhere. And then I try to find out where they may have made progress. And if we've come to terms that they really haven't made much progress, then we have to say, okay, well, what the hell happened? What are you doing? Why are you avoiding these things about your own life? Why are you avoiding these elements? What do you think slowed you down? Why do you think it slowed you down? What stepped in your way? What stepped in your path? What stopped you from achieving what you wanted to achieve for the last 10 years? It's really, really sad to see that people, they're sabotaging themselves in the process of growth. So I think that's where the idea is. And, you know, there's a point where you have to understand what role that you have with other people as well. What effect you have on other people. And I know that the conversation on our live chat is getting pretty dumb. You know, so I'm kind of ignoring many aspects of this. You know,
I'm trying not to get gripped into. I'm trying not to get triggered, but
yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right though. Like, to stay relevant in this conversation, you know, I'd rather choose not to. Like, there's two kinds of currents to take. There's a current of like the opposite of personal dev, which is the reversal. Whereas, you know, you stop learning as much data as you need to move forward. You slow down and then you start going backwards. And this is where you see relationships, friendships, and careers and things in your actual life reverse on you and collapse, versus that 1% rule that you're talking about, right? You just incrementally just add on every day by day, and that in itself becomes a habit, and then you become in a way better place. And like, I'll give you an example. Like, in my life, Dave, I don't know if it happens for you, probably. People are always like, you know, Dan, every month or two where I do see you and I don't see you, you're just different. And I'm like, well, duh, evolution, bro. Like, I don't want to be the same Dan you know a month ago, 2 weeks ago, a day ago. Like, you know, if you're not growing, then like, what is life? You know, like, in my mind, like, I want to live life to help people in the way that, you know, I just see fit. It's relevant to me. I want to make my impact. I want to surround myself with good people, and I want to grow. I want to know more about who I am. You know, there's so much to discover, right? There's not enough time in my lifetime to discover who I am, right? And I feel like it's almost like personal development is a mirage, because I feel like the more we do learn to know, the more intricate and finite the idea is that we're infinitely growing to the point where we won't ever fully encapsulate like who we are, but we'll be in a forever search, even though we're becoming a better and better version of ourselves every day. I literally feel like there is no end to it, you know? And I feel like people are always like on this chase that, you know, and I used to be in that place. Like, you know, there's the chase to like become a better person, you know? And it's like, some people, you know, it's very short-lived because they think that it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to read a bunch of books, I'm going to learn about typology, and I'll be good, right? But it's an infinity, you know? And it's about appreciating the process, because if you don't appreciate the process of learning about yourself, then that infinity gets way more scary. And it's like, then why am I doing this, right? I feel like that's the perception of a lot of people on a very deep level. They're like, why am I even going to do the personal work if there's not going to be an end result? The end result is the present moment with everything that you learn thereafter, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Got a good question here. It says, so masculine, feminine energy in relationships, how important is that? Okay, so masculine, feminine energy. We've had a lot of videos about this particular topic in the past. It's extremely important in intimate relationships, to the point where it doesn't make things perfect. Here's the misconception about it, is that when you have a masculine energy and a feminine energy combined, it creates a duality, and that duality creates a lot of attraction. But it doesn't mean that the relationship is going to be successful. What happens is that it puts you in a position to where you have to be able to relate to that femininity. If you're a masculine male, you have to be able to relate to that femininity and find it within yourself, because you actually are comprised of both. You have to find it within yourself to be able to understand and relate to it. And if you have true understanding, you're not going to react to another person's reaction, because you understand where that person's coming from. And as hard as that is to admit when you're going through it, that's what the reality is. So if you understand where that person's coming from because you've tapped into it internally, that's where your growth is going to perceive. Whereas if you have two masculine energies, I don't think that's going to accomplish crap. It's going to be a battle. Or if two feminine energies, is going to be a tidal wave.
You know what? I think masculine and femininity is like, it's a bigger portion of like relationship dynamics when we're talking about that specifically. but still, like, it does not fill at all the void that is getting to know people, because everybody's so different. It can only help you just that much more. You know, it's just still an accessory to real life situations, right? And I think that's the best way to put it. You know, as much as I know, and I try to be present with masculine and feminine energy, and resonate with it and practice it, and everything that it is, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're still you, you're still imperfect, you still make mistakes, you know, you may not vibe, even though, like, even if, like, you do have a relation, like a dynamic that you find works, and you find yourself to be compatible with your opposite energy, right? It just goes to say that it might not fall through with the other variables that are going to be in place, because after you have the connection, then comes the intimacy, then comes the actual compatibility aspect. Once you get, you know, attraction out of the way, then you have the whole 90% of the relationship to go into, right? The reciprocal nature that is relationships, right? Just because you have masculine and feminine energy doesn't make it reciprocal. And a lot of people mistake that, right? Just because you have a dual relationship in MBTI or a dual relationship in Socionics does not make it reciprocal. You have to be, so many different things have to align for it to be reciprocal. But most of it is choice, right? Which is the overall theme here, you know, in this video, is choice, right? Without choice, none of this can really happen. If you don't choose to be totally open and transparent, you know, you're not going to get that deep level intimacy that's needed in a relationship. It's not just masculine and feminine energy. It's just not INTP and the dual of an INTP or the dual of an E. You know what I mean? Duals can only go so far. Typology can only go so far. Masculine and feminine energy can only go so far.
See, when you say energy, that's the type of information I don't receive really well. I'm like, it's a little too metaphysical for me. All I can tell you is that there's masculine people and there's feminine people. And, you know, and people who embrace that particular aspect more than the other aspect that's inside of themselves. And that particular aspect, I know that is, they identify with one more than the other, or they kind of are right in the middle, and it doesn't matter which way they go. That's the challenge with this, though, and I do think it's important to answer that question. But more importantly, you know, when it boils down into how relationships work, it's not dependent on one freaking system. It's a comprehensive human dynamic that no one is ever going to be able to streamline into one category or one taxonomy or something, you know, like what is that damn system? Avoidant, dismissive, all that crap. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that beautiful thing. That's another.
Yeah, it's another way of determining how screwed up we are as human beings and how to move up into something that's a little more healthy. But I think that, you know, when it comes down to it, it's about exploring all aspects of yourself and realizing that you're kind of screwed up in the first place and being able to accept those parts of yourself. And that's where the idea is.
You know what, to be honest, like, there's just so much, like, to be said that, like, after all of this is said and done, and like 50 years later, when you know so much, whoever you are, just be fucking humble to the person you're connecting to. Just be humble and just chill the fuck out. Know who you are. Know who they are. Let them be them. No resistance. Let bygones be bygones. Just let that be it. Okay. So all said and done, all you can know is what you know, and as long as you know yourself and you're cool with who you are, like, why does everything else fucking matter?
Yeah, it's about being able to accept yourself too, being able to accept the aspects of yourself and being able to balance all of it out. Spiritual development, emotional development, interpersonal relationship development. And some people don't want to do all this. Some people are just satisfied as is, and I part of me loves that about them. They're able to just be. And there are some people who are really good at that, and other people are challenged with it. Me particularly, I'm quite challenged with it myself, being able to look at things and just say, okay, I've got to work on this. I've got to work on this. So that's the idea, is being able to kind of.
I didn't mean to get too real there, by the way. I just like that's
real. Did you say too real? It's the opposite, too surreal. You're talking about energy and shit, right?
No, but like literally,
like I listen. I feel their auras, and I feel their energy and vibration. It's a little too far fetched for me. Like, I'm trying to keep it real.
No, but seriously, like, this is like the year for me where I'm like really trying to get out of the clouds, and it's just like all this stuff is so great like in theory, but like I'm really trying to grip it all into like what's tangible. Like at the end of the day, all this typology stuff and socionics, it's just about you and what's relevant to you. Like people need to stop making it about other people and just start worrying about yourself, man. Because unless you're a billionaire, you need to worry about yourself. Like I just don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like too many people are just stigmatizing other people, putting each other in bad places. Learn, do you grow yourself? Worry about you. Become a billionaire. If you're not a billionaire, shut the fuck up. Like,
what does being a billionaire have anything to do with you shutting the fuck up?
is that it? I don't know. But like, I'm tired of
being a billionaire doesn't give you any rights. It doesn't give you any more rights than any other American.
Being a billionaire makes you great again.
I guess that's true because the person who come up with that.
Listen, if you're a billionaire, you have less problems than if you're not a billionaire, right? So, I think this is where I am in this time of the video. So, do we have any good questions? We haven't answered any questions.
Right? I've tried to pay attention to this. Looks like there's a couple hookups going on right now. But as far as
guys, right now, because my patience is withering away. If you guys have some good questions, speak now, because
forever hold your peace.
Forever hold your peace or ignorance, whichever one you want to carry. Hold your ignorance. Hold it in a nice little ball sack. Like just that. But yeah, it doesn't look like anybody's interested in actually participating. So
no, it's okay. They're doing their thing. I don't need questions from them. I can monologue on my own.
I know.
I don't. It's just if they want to ask questions, that's fine. But you know, it's fine by me. Like as far as the topic goes, it's just getting down to, it's getting down to the fundamentals of finding out. As far as Chris' question, good books for personal growth, the answer is whatever you're struggling with. There's you can't just kind of approach the topic of personal growth. I'm reading right now a book called I don't even know the title off my head. I haven't touched it in probably 3 or 4 days, and I forgot the title. But it's about making marriages work. I'm not even in a marriage, but it's the idea of I know that's the intimacy aspect of the marriage is important to understand because it's a weak part of myself. And the more perspective I have on it, the more I can have total acceptance of it. And that's the idea. So, as long as we get to that point where we start looking at things in multiple perspectives, we can obviously be able to critique ourselves fairly.
Just a matter of appreciating difference.
Yeah, fairly.
Like who the fuck are you? Like, you're so great, right? With your one great proficient way of being, right? You have a couple of great strengths, but like, there's so many different varieties of people out there. Like, if you just walk outside your house, there's like everybody else that's good at everything else than you are. And it's like, just appreciate it. Just be humble. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I got a question that says, can personality type change? And the answer is it changes as much as your ethnicity. That's how much it changes. So, if you can change ethnicity, then your personality type can change. With time, though, to be fair, what does change is your integration of and acceptance of the other functions. And start seeing their perspectives and start valuing their perspectives more. If you're looking at MBTI type, you start looking at things as a whole again, because we're born into a certain duality and we're focused on one piece of information. And as we grow, we integrate other pieces of information to come up with a more comprehensive worldview, right? A more powerful worldview to be able to see the things in the way that we see them and start seeing things pieced together. Here's where the real interesting part comes from. Our mind can only do so much. But when you start surrendering the mind and allowing your spirit to come to fruition, what happens as a result of that is a complete integration back to the source, back to God, or whatever you want to call it.
Man.
Yeah, and so it's you start losing the mental perspective and start feeling and embracing and being connected to the greater whole. And this is where spirituality kicks in place. So the mind can only get you so far, and that's an important thing. Delaram asks, what's the difference between personality and character? Personality is a combination of character and temperament. So personality is a larger taxonomy that includes character and temperament. Okay, character is formed off of your life and what your values
Delaram with the good questions.
Yeah, she's awesome. Shout out to Delaram because she actually is
shout out to my duel.
Yeah. So and she has character. So, you know, there's this other aspect of character. Inside character, you have all the life elements, and then you have temperament, which is the kind of the way that you were designed or created or born or made or evolved or whatever you believe. You know, that's your temperament. And so once you understand that, then you can understand what the overarching creates the personalities, your character and temperament. So, but yeah, I hope that answers your question. Anna Molly says, do you still think ENFPs can't be Enneagram type 8? I think anybody can be a type 8. It's just a lot less likely. It is possible because what I just mentioned is character. Your character could be formed by some type of worldly environment. It could be formed by your values and something, or maybe some kind of issue happened in your nurture to where you formed an Enneagram 8 ego complex. It's just a lot less likely because it puts the values of the feeling function kind of subjugated to things that are much more, much more prominent, logical or whatnot. But it's not impossible. It's just a lot less likely. So I don't think it can't be. I think there's a universal crossover. You can be any Enneagram type of any MBTI type, as long as the situation prevails in what it is. It's just a lot less likely. And it's even more or less likely with certain sociotypes. So what?
Yeah, I see that. I see two questions on Core so often. What does an X type look like? And can a so-and-so type be an Enneagram X? And it's just like, dude, like, how do you, like, you can't suspect to really understand what they look like just based off of behavior. It's like, you gotta talk to the person. Like, how can you know visually, right? There's so many people who want to cross unlikeliness with each other. Like, what does the rarity do for you? If, you know, it's so unlikely to exist, you know? Mm-hmm. Have you met an ENFP type 8?
Actually, Catherine Favre from Enneagram is an ENFP type 8.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So she's the one that formed tri-type theory. She's an 8 ENFP. It's just really, really uncommon. So watching how she behaves and, you know, observes and talks is very unstereotypical compared to you know, it just doesn't look like she doesn't even look like an ENFP. But she's familiar enough with typology where I would say that she probably knows her type pretty well. But just you don't get that very often. Let me put it that way. As far as another question I saw, it was, you know, what's the best way of formulating a group in order to participate in a common vision? Especially or mostly in a business context, is my insight to answer this question. First thing is thorough screening of who you get into partnerships with. Make sure it's the right people. It's very important to look at the values, their history, their resume, what they have and haven't done, you know, and what they expect out of the partnership, and have that all in paper. And obviously have strong bylaws so that the rules aren't violated by either party. And it's important not to start off on the right foot by having your bylaws or your operating agreement or whatever you call it sorted out and figured out. And number two is to work on yourself so you don't get caught up in stupid problems, because a lot of the things that people fight over are pretty dumb, and you have to know when to let things go. Is it really worth compromising a partnership over for a few bucks? And that's something you have to consider, you know, and the values that are associated with that. So that being said, you know, I would say that it looks like I got actually read a book comparing if it was type 8. We're going through these questions. Yeah, we got just I think that was most of the questions on there as far as that goes. Dan, do you want to add anything on your?
Aside from how wonderful this conversation was and getting back with MBTV for a little bit, really appreciated everybody. There's a lot of viewers this time, which is kind of cool. I need to do some more socionics research and stuff, but I'm more interested to get into more of the intertype dynamics on a below the surface place with you when I get to that point. In terms of other topics that you would cover, like spirituality and anything else, you know, more than happy to cover anything that you'd want with my participation. It's cool to see everybody again back in the chat, back at it again with the side chat. I think that at the end of the day, anything that you take in data wise should have some type of significance for you, and it should be relevant, right? And if you can, I really think that people should stay within a 3-week frame, right? Go 1 week back, 1 week forward, and stay in the present moment. Be careful of how much data that you take in, as much as possible, and just make sure it's relevant. Because at the end of the day, like this is like I've always blown. Like my mind's blown always by this concept. You have a finite amount of time in this world, and you have an even more finite time with the people inside your life. You know what I mean? So make it relevant. You know, get the most out of it.
Got a question real quick. It says, do you react positively or indifferent to the information you two gather from the IMEs in your super id block? I react pretty negatively to the IMEs that hit my super id. I get highly annoyed or highly irritated or even defensive. So that's to answer your correct question. And then I see another question here. Pascal, you know, they say quadras represent an age like child to adult. Yeah, that's just the overall feeling of the quadra that the quadra kind of displays. They pertain alphas to being like children, playful conversation related around just witty banter or whatever. And it's just kind of not really set in a certain direction. They're not really trying to steer the conversation in a certain way, whereas betas are more like teenagers or early adults even. And they're trying to establish structure, power dynamics, who's in control, trying to build a, you know, some kind of, you know, foundation to a business or whatever it may be, structure. And then your gamma quadra is more your serious adult, middle-aged adult, taking life a little more seriously. They've kind of been through the ringer, a little more wise, a little more stern, like smaller groups, a little more intimate connection. And then your last quadra is your wise old men. And they tend to look for the good things in life and kind of reflect on the good memories. So these are the kind of the general vibes of the quadras. But as far as going beyond the, besides going beyond that, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of value in the quadras because again, you take out a lot of the personal values of that quadra, the personal values of that person in that quadra. So I got another question. There isn't actually much information on super id. Can anyone define it in a concise way? It is the type of unconscious super ego. No, the super ego is unvalued. The super id is valued. So it's a totally different thing. The super id is something you're unconscious, and it's valued. So it's something that you are open to receiving information on, but you don't have a easy time metabolizing that. So it's like taking a freaking steroid so you can build muscle. You need it from an outside source, so you need that information. So it tends to charge you up, as long as that information is, and more importantly, this is suggestive than even the mobilizing. The suggestive is really malleable, and you can even be manipulated by the suggestive function. So you can be controlled in a way by the suggestive function based on if they're presenting that information. So your dual can almost kind of control you in a way by tapping into your suggestive function. So the super id is just a very malleable part of your unconscious, and it's because it's id, it's kind of innate, and it's primal. It's primal, and it's it's really getting down into what your core desires are, kind of like a Freudian type id. It's kind of being able to your unconscious needs and wants, so you can when someone's giving you that information, it fulfills a unconscious part of you. So,
hey Damon.
Yeah,
I'm gonna bounce. I have priorities, but it was really nice talking to everybody. It's nice talking and catching up with you. I will see everybody later, and have a good day.
Yeah. All right, Dan. Take care.
All right. Yeah.
And I see something here that says, oh, well, Anna has so many questions off topic. Anna, just hop on Slack. There's a lot of people on there that'll help you if you have a lot of off-topic questions. And then Taylor's telling me to make a move. Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and end this live stream at that point, and I'm gonna actually, what I'll do is I'm gonna end the live stream, but I'm actually going to post a link on Slack if anybody wants to hop in and kind of communicate with each other. So I will post a public link as soon as I end this live stream on Slack. It will be in the announcements section on Slack. So if anybody wants that link to hop in and kind of chat, and Molly, you can do a random, you can hop in there and ask your questions. I'm more than happy to stay in there for another 30 minutes or so. And then, yeah. So, yeah, no, you're right. And Mindsight, you're right. They're a little different, but it's similar. That was what the point I was trying to make. Okay, so they're very similar. Anyway, you guys, I appreciate you guys viewing, and then we'll catch up with you on next time. Take care.